Welcome, everyone, to the Ready for the Draft podcast. I am your host, Gregg Schutze. This is episode 28 of the 2023 podcast series, where we take a look at the draft-eligible prospects and get you ready for the NFL draft. And we are now less than 2 weeks away from the NFL draft. And it's time to go ahead and jump right into our positional rankings because, look, I want to make sure that we're breaking down each and every position leading up to the draft, talk through really each position group. Who are the guys that we should be paying attention to on all 3 days of the draft? And we've talked about the quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, and tight ends. So the fifth installment now, we're talking about the offensive line. So that's right, the guys in the trenches, the tackles, the guards, the centers. We're going to be talking about all of that. But first, I wanted to just kind of talk about my new iteration of my mock draft. I'm still putting it together. But when you take a look at the mock draft and kind of the landscape, I think the news coming out about Bryce Young and the Carolina Panthers, that they are most interested in Bryce Young, and now he's favored to be the number 1 overall pick. As I think about that, Bryce Young really felt like he was going to be the perfect fit there in Houston. I wasn't sure if D'Amico Ryans and Nick Caserio would be sold on any of the other quarterbacks, and it sounds like there's a good chance that maybe they're not. And really because Bryce Young seems like he is the quarterback that is most game ready of the 4 quarterbacks at the top. And so I think if Bryce Young goes number 1 overall to Carolina, then at number 2, I'm not sold on C.J. Stroud, Anthony Richardson, or Will Levis going to Houston there at number 2. I think you look at D'Amico Ryans, who is a defensive-minded head coach, get your elite pass rusher of Will Anderson Jr. We know what D'Amico Ryans was able to do as a defensive coordinator for the San Francisco 49ers, especially with a guy like Nick Bosa kind of leading the charge there. And he gets his guy there with Will Anderson at number 2 overall. Then at number 3, Arizona Cardinals. Look, if they're not going to get Will Anderson, you get the next best thing in terms of pass rush. You get Tyree Wilson. Number 4, here's where the Colts, they have a head coach in Steichen who, look, he's developed quarterbacks. He has a reputation for doing that. And, when you talk about Shane Steichen, the most notable, obviously, is Jalen Hurts and what he was able to do there. You look at Anthony Richardson, it's the footwork. It's the footwork. You watch his film, he's got pretty good pocket presence, keeps those eyes down the field, he can step up, he can sidestep the rush. What you don't see is consistency with the footwork. He'll make the same throw twice in the same game. One will be on target, good footwork. Bad footwork, the ball sails on him. If Steichen can get that under control and Jim Irsay can be patient enough to allow him to develop a little bit. Look, they've got Gardner Minshew, Nick Foles, and Sam Ehlinger right now on the roster. So you've got those 3 guys. You don't have to rush Anthony Richardson along. If Steichen can get that footwork cleaned up, Anthony Richardson could very well end up being that surprise of the 2023 draft. He is the boom or bust prospect in this year's draft, though. Number 5, Seattle. Look, we know Pete Carroll is all about giving second chances, and they were porous against the run a season ago. If Jalen Carter's sitting there, let's not mess around. Seattle, go ahead and get your guy in the middle and then be able to go ahead and start tweaking things on that defense outside of that. You're going to want to get a corner. You're going to want to get some edge rush help. And, offensively, you're going to want to get a receiver. But I think it all starts right now with Jalen Carter there at number 5. Look, you got 2 picks in round number 1. You can kind of gamble a little bit with this first one and get your elite prospect there in Jalen Carter. Some very well some feel he may very well be the number 1 prospect in this year's draft. When you look at the Lions there at 6, the trade involving Jeff Okudah to the Falcons really, that signifies that they're going corner. Devin Witherspoon I have going there. The Raiders at 7. They could go offensive line. I think there's definitely a possibility. Taking care of Jimmy G has to be a priority. Peter Skoronski and Paris Johnson Jr. have to get consideration there. They also need pass rush help. So obviously if Tyree Wilson were to fall, in this case, Lucas Van Ness could potentially be the guy here. Maybe even Nolan Smith. But I've got them taking Christian Gonzalez. They don't have a number 1 corner on the roster. If I'm a Raider fan, I would be concerned with that. They've got to come out of this draft with a number one corner, and I think that guy is going to be Christian Gonzalez out of Oregon. Atlanta Falcons sitting there at number 8. Look, the pass rush we know has been anemic. 21 sacks a season ago, good for 31st in the league. That's why they bring in Ryan Nielsen. This is a guy who has proven to develop defensive linemen. Did that at NC State, did that with the Saints. Saints had, were top 5 in sacks a season ago with 48. So you put him on this team, you watch what they're able to do already, bringing in guys like Calais Campbell and Bud Dupree now. And you've got Lorenzo Carter already on the roster. You have a couple of young guys in Arnold Ebiketie and D'Angelo Malone. And you look at that and you say, all right, well, there's enough depth there. Do they really need to go with another edge rusher? Absolutely. Because Campbell and Dupree are both there on one-year deals. You've got two guys to where they can help develop a guy by the name of Lucas Van Ness along. Ryan Nielsen can do the same thing. When you look at Van Ness, and you're talking about Nielsen running a defense that has a multiple design, if he's talking about being multiple, Lucas Van Ness could play a lot of different roles for him. And that development, look, he's still pretty raw, just has that bull rush to his name. If he can really understand the nuances of getting after the quarterback, Lucas Van Ness could wind up being a steal there in the top 10. Look, the damage that he was able to do sitting on the bench as to start the game. This guy didn't start. He was a backup, and the guy was still able to put together 13 sacks, 19 tackles for loss. I think that's a great fit there for Atlanta. Sitting there at 9, the Bears. I think if Jalen Carter falls to 9, he's going to be the pick. Otherwise, it's going offensive line. A lot of people think it's Peter Skoronski, but look, unless you're confident that Peter Skoronski is going to be your right tackle, I think you have to go Paris Johnson Jr. here. And why? Skoronski, everyone talks about him being an all-pro guard and that potential. I believe the same thing. I think he can be an all-pro guard, but if you've got Tevin Jenkins already moving inside, and he's done well inside. Really all you need is that offensive tackle. Paris Johnson Jr. provides a lot of length, a ton of length. You put him out there on the right side, and look, if Braxton Jones doesn't hold up protecting the blind side of Justin Fields, then you can go ahead and swap the two if you need to. But look, you've got to be able to keep Justin Fields upright. 58 sacks is just not going to cut it. And when you look at what Paris Johnson Jr. has been able to do, keeping quarterbacks upright there at Ohio State, I think he's got to be the pick. Number 10, Nolan Smith out of Georgia. Reminds you a lot of Hassan Reddick. You put him out there, you have those two guys on the field. You've got Brandon Graham, who's back for another season. Derek Barnett's still on the roster. Look, if you can have the trio of Nolan Smith, Josh Sweat, Hassan Reddick as the future of your pass rush, I think you're doing some pretty good things. I think the Eagles definitely worth the risk there with Nolan Smith, because really he's undersized. That's really the biggest thing. Outside of that, I think Nolan Smith, the athleticism, the leadership, the energy that he brings, I think it'd be a great pick there for Philly. So where are the other two quarterbacks? Well, at 11, I've got Tennessee taking C.J. Stroud. Will it be there at 11? Probably not. They're probably going to trade up. But I think ultimately when you look at Ryan Tannehill, he's in the last year of his deal. He struggled with some injuries. And frankly, when you look at the offense, it's all dominated by Derrick Henry. When you look at the passing game, really, there isn't one. The highest that they were ranked was 21st in the league in passing, and that was in 2019 when they went to the AFC Championship. Since then, they've been in the bottom third of the league, and they've got to be able to throw the football. And so getting C.J. Stroud, I think, should be a priority, especially if they see that Anthony Richardson is going number 4 overall to Indy, or potentially if Indy trades up with Arizona possibly at number 3. I ultimately think that Tennessee needs to run to the podium as quick as possible after making a trade and get that name in there. And then Houston sitting there at 12, I actually have them taking Will Levis. I think that Houston, they're not going to be comfortable taking a quarterback at 2. But at 12, that might be better value. They could sit back and really watch how everything plays out. If a team's going to trade up to get Will Levis, more power to you. But I don't know that they will. I don't know if there is any team that's going to do that. And look, Houston needs a quarterback of the future. And when you look at it, this is a team that finished 31st in the league in total yards. That's just not going to cut it. It's just not. And so I think really what you have to figure out is whether or not you are okay with Will Levis, what he's able to do, what he's able to accomplish, and really, with Davis Mills and Case Keenum, they both have starting experience. You don't have to necessarily force Will Levis in to be a starter right away, but I think you've got your guy of the future, and you're able to go ahead and build that offense around him. So with DeMeco Ryans, he gets his enforcer, the guy that can get after the quarterback, in Will Anderson. Then they go after Levis at 12. So those, I wanted to really kind of break down the top 10 right now, but obviously with the two quarterbacks sitting there at 11 and 12, wanted to make sure that I threw those in there because look, at the end of the day, when I look at my mock draft and the way I put it together, it's more so what teams I see fitting with these players. Because a season ago, I had Chris Olave going to the Saints. I had that penciled in all year long. And then what happens? At the very end, I decided, Chris Olave is not going to go, 16, 17 to the Saints. He's going to go much higher than that. Ultimately, what happens is the Saints trade up to 11, and they get Chris Olave. So really what I'm looking at now is I'm not necessarily paying attention to where on the board. If a team wants to go up and get a guy, they're going to go ahead and make the trade and go up and get him. So I'm really eyeballing and trying to figure out exactly where these guys may wind up team-wise, more so than what pick they're going to be coming off the board. So that's really what I'm trying to do here, but I really do feel like the top 10, you've got some guys that are going to come off the board there, and between those first 12, I think you probably are looking at your top 10 in this year's draft. So more to come there. I'll have my final mock all put together. It'll be all 7 rounds. We're going to go ahead and go over parts of it over the course of the next couple of weeks as we get ready for the start of the draft on Thursday, April 27th in Kansas City. So now we'll go ahead and pivot to the offensive line. And really what we need to do is kind of take a look at all 3 positions. And really, again, as I've done in the last 4 installments of the positional breakdowns, in order to move forward, we've got to go ahead and take a step back. We're going to take a look at the tackles, guards, and centers real quickly with the last 5 drafts and be able to kind of talk through those to ultimately see what we can expect out of this year's draft class. So in 2018, starting with the offensive tackles, 19 tackles taken. And really that was kind of a trend because we saw that again in 2019, followed by 21 in 2020. There were 27 in 2021. That was really where we saw a jump in the overall quality of the draft class. And then obviously 2022, there were another 22 that were drafted, another really solid draft class there. So in 2018, 2 first-round picks, and that was Mike McGlinchey, Colton Miller going to the Niners and Raiders. And then in round 2, Connor Williams going to the Cowboys. He ultimately kicked inside to guard. Brian O'Neill to the Vikings. In round 3, good Lord, Orlando Brown sitting there, 83 overall. You think about that. You think about a guy like DeWan Jones, and you talk about what he ran his 40 time in or anything like that. Man, when you got a guy that big and can move as well as they do, and you just go and you get him. I don't think that DeWan Jones is going to end up being a first rounder, but I see him coming off the board early on day 2. You learn from your mistakes. If you want to talk about a steal, how about Jordan Mailata going number 233 overall there in the 7th round? When we know what he's meant there to the Eagles, especially when they made their Super Bowl run. 2019, we have 4 offensive linemen come off the board in round 1. Obviously, you had Jonah Williams and Andre Dillard going 11 and 22. The surprise, Titus Howard going to the Texans at 23 overall out of Alabama State. Then you had Caleb McGarry coming to the Falcons from Washington. He's been re-signed by the Falcons, by the way. Jawan Taylor now with the Chiefs. He was picked up by the Jaguars, number 35 overall at the start of the 2nd round. Max Sharping in round 2. He's kicked inside to guard and has played well enough to be a starter. David Edwards, formerly with the Rams, he's providing some depth and moving on. In 2020, this is where we saw the jump in the offensive line, at least at the very top of the draft, right? Only 21 drafted, but you had Andrew Thomas, Jedrick Wills, Mekhi Becton, Tristan Wirfs, Austin Jackson, all taken in the top 20. And then Isaiah Wilson rounds that out. We know that was a miss there, but there were 6 offensive tackles taken in round number 1. really kind of staggering when you look at that. This is a draft class that also had Ezra Cleveland, who's kicked inside to guard. Lucas Niang right now is the starting right tackle for the Chiefs. Ben Barch for the Jags, he's kicked inside to guard as well. Charlie Heck has gotten some playing time with the Texans. Really a solid draft class overall. Hakeem Adeniji fell to the 6th round there to the Bengals. He's been a nice role player as well. So a draft class that was kind of underrated as you started getting into some of that, day 3, just more so from the standpoint these guys are providing depth, getting some playing time there at the next level. 2021, just 3 at the top, but that was Penei Sewell, Alex Leatherwood, and Christian Darrisaw. I think everyone was expecting Tevin Jenkins to be a home run at a tackle for the Bears at 39 overall, kicking inside to guard. Liam Eichenberg, much the same way. Walker Little's getting his chance to be a starter at right tackle for the Jags. Jackson Carman the same there with the Bengals. Samuel Cosme going to the Commanders. He's also looking at as a guard. Same goes for Dylan Radins. So when you look at this draft, Brady Christensen coming off the board in round number 3 to the Panthers. He's a guard. Spencer Brown to the Bills, right tackle. Dan Moore has struggled there for the Steelers to this point. We could be seeing the Steelers taking a tackle early in the draft to really kind of compete with him there. And then in 2022, 5 offensive tackles. And when we look at this, Ikem Ekwonu, Evan Neal, Charles Cross, we know what we got there with the top 10 picks. Trevor Penning, still a work in progress for the Saints. Tyler Smith, really a home run for the Cowboys. Nicholas Petit-Frere has some positional versatility. Abraham Lucas, a home run for the Seahawks. These guys were taken in round number 3. No picks taken in round 2, surprisingly, out of this draft class. But you have Bernard Raymond to the Colts. He's a starter. So it's a draft class that's still kind of playing out. Thayer Munford to the Raiders, getting a little bit of playing time. But definitely a draft class that was really heavy up there at the very top. And then after that, some value there in round number 3. And Max Mitchell in round 4 to the Jets. He got some playing time until he was injured. So draft class at tackle, I think it's really going to be interesting to see how it plays out this year. I think there's some guys definitely at the top that we have to be excited about. When we talk about first round, I've already kind of spoiled it. I'm looking at Paris Johnson Jr. Is he my number 1? No. I still have Peter Skoronski as the best offensive lineman, period. 6'4", 313 out of Northwestern, 5'1", 640. But look, this is a consensus All-American. 32 and a quarter inch arms. That's what everyone is going to be talking about when they look at Peter Skoronski. And it's kind of a shame that everyone wants to focus on those shorter arms. This is a guy who I think really he was born with them, so he's been able to develop his style of play and be more effective with those shorter arms, understanding that he needs to get his hands on his man quicker, that he needs to have better footwork, his ability to get his hands into that lineman and then not allow him to separate. Impressive leverage, tremendous understanding of angles. You see the power as a run blocker, the feet and the hands required as a pass protector. I think the feet are really his calling card, though. Allow him to easily slide, mirror, redirect. This is a guy, I think he's quick and aggressive to attack first. And look, once he gets his hands on you, it's all over. So I have him as my number 1 tackle. Ultimately, I mentioned that I have him coming off the board. Actually, I didn't, because I actually have him coming off the board number 13 to the Jets. I think the Jets ultimately, when they get to that point, they're looking for value. I think that really makes a lot of sense for the Jets there. And then I've got Paris Johnson Jr. I've already kind of talked about him just a little bit, but 6'6", 313, prototypical length for an offensive tackle, and that's why I think the Bears are going to go with him ultimately. Over 36 inches with those arms. I mean, it's freaking ridiculous just how long this guy is. And then at the same time, was able to put up 225 29 times in the bench press at the combine. So his upper body strength was never in question. I think the lower body needs to develop a little bit to be able to anchor at times. But he does have the flexibility to get out, seal the edge, has the power in his hands to strike, jolt the defender. You see that on tape as well. I think he still needs to work on that lower body, that lower half to generate more movement in the running game, get the hands consistent to match his feet. But look, he's an intelligent player, two-time Scholar athlete. And really when you look at what he was able to do this past season, 9 hurries given up, 0 hits, did have 2 sacks, 0 sacks in 2021 when he was playing at right guard. This is a guy that I think is going to be a day 1 starter there for the Bears. Number 3 on my list is going to be Broderick Jones. And look, I've got Broderick Jones coming off the board, number 14 overall to the Patriots. Look, the Patriots signed Riley Reif, but it's only a 1-year deal. I don't expect him to really, I think he's going to provide depth more than anything else. I think they're begging to find an offensive lineman here that can take over that spot. Broderick Jones, 6'5", 311. I think really better than what we thought, in terms of the length. Over 34 inches, sub 5 flat 40 at the combine. So we see the athleticism. This is a dude that has a knack for dominating and just roughing up defenders. Wants to get physical with you, excelled in the outside zone scheme, ability to get out in front, locate defenders, move, dominate in the open field. This is a guy, look, 0 sacks given up in 2022 as well. So you see the effortless foot speed, the fluidity in his hips. I think, Bill Belichick, there may be some other guys on his radar, a receiver or a corner, but if he has a chance to get Broderick Jones, I think he's going to jump at the opportunity to be able to do that. The other guy that I have here, and I've been debating whether or not to move him up in my rankings, I still have him at number 4, and that's Darnell Wright out of Tennessee. 6'5", 333 pounds. This dude is big. He's physical. Just put on the Alabama film. You're going to watch him getting the better of Will Anderson Jr. with quick feet, good angles, good power in his hands. There was only one of Will Anderson's 63 pressures that were attributed to Wright. And Anderson's even come out and said that Wright was the best offensive tackle that he's faced in college. You watch him against Jalen Carter. He was solid as well there, able to stand him up, neutralize his rush as well. Wright, look, he started 42 games, 13 at left tackle, 27 at right tackle. Gave up 8 sacks between his sophomore and junior seasons. Didn't allow a sack and just gave up 8 pressures in 2022. I look at him. I think the Bears could potentially take him there at 9. If we're just talking strictly right tackle. I think ultimately, though, the match made in heaven would be to the Bucs there at 19, especially if we're talking about moving Tristan Wirfs to left tackle. There's a hole at right tackle. I think this is the guy that's going to end up filling that void. One other guy who could end up going in round 1, but I actually think now he's coming off the board early round 2, and that's Anton Harrison out of Oklahoma. Ran a 4.9, 840 at the combine, 6'4", 315, 34.25-inch arms as well. So this is a guy that is an easy mover. That's one of the things that I think really jumps off the screen when you watch him play. Pro Football Focus noted that he just had 1 sack and 8 quarterback hurries a season ago. This dude, quick feet, can handle both vertical and lateral pass sets. Doesn't really generate a ton of movement right now at the point of attack. I think he needs to improve that lower body strength to anchor, but he has the agility to be able to pull, climb to the second level, make blocks on the move. And look, he's used to blocking for mobile quarterbacks. So, if the Chiefs want to go ahead and get another right tackle and upgrade over Lucas Niang, now that Andrew Wiley has moved on, then you know what? Harrison, blocking for Mahomes, he's done it with Spencer Rattler, Caleb Williams, Dylan Gabriel. I think that'd be a great fit. I think he ultimately comes off the board there on day 2. I think the Steelers need a tackle desperately. They may look to try to land him at some point there in the second round. So second round tackles. After that, guys that I'm definitely targeting. One of those is going to be Matthew Bergeron out of Syracuse. 6'5", 318. Not tremendous length from Bergeron, but this is a guy, look, he's another guy who is big and physical. We can talk about the 5 sacks that he gave up, but ultimately he's a versatile guy, play both guard and tackle, can be dominant in the running game, sustains, finishes his blocks, adept at climbing to the second level. Really the footwork is the biggest question mark more than anything else in pass protection. But look, I think, I look at a team like the Washington Commanders. I think that'd be a great fit because he can move inside the guard right away, also has the ability to play tackle. I think that makes a lot of sense. I mentioned DeJuan Jones kind of stole the thunder there a little bit, but DeJuan Jones is just a mammoth of a human being. The guy is enormous. And I look at the Bengals, and if you've got Orlando Brown Jr. on one side and DeJuan Jones on the other side, just think how much fun that would be, especially with Jonah Williams now saying that he wants out of Cincinnati. But DeJuan Jones, look, 6'8", 374, nearly 36.5-inch arms. You've got to literally, you can call an Uber to try to get around this guy, but it's literally going to take you forever. Joe Burrow, is going to have fun, with these two guys in front of him. DeJuan Jones reminds me a lot of Trent Brown and Phil Lodeholt, towering right tackles, guys that, can play in the league for a decade plus. I think DeJuan Jones is going to be a guy similar to that. I'd love to see him end up in a Bengal uniform just because, man, having those twin towers would be a lot of fun to watch. Cody Mauk, they're out of North Dakota State, 6'5", 302, ran a 5.08 40 at the combine, just 32 and 3/8 inch arms. So when you talk about the length, he's one of those guys that, look, could he play tackle? Absolutely. I think everyone's projecting him inside to guard. What I love about him is, look, he showed up there in Fargo as a 221-pound walk-on tight end. Puts on 80 pounds while still maintaining the athleticism, brings a nastiness to the offensive line play, physical presence for the Bison. Looked like a dancing bear on the outside of left tackle. You put him inside, I think he's got the chops to be able to do it. I think the Lions are a team that could potentially go after him. I think the Bills are another team that would make things really interesting, adding him to the lineup there in round number 2. Moving on to round number 3, and I've got, 4 tackles that I think can come off the board in round 3. The first one that I'm going to look at is Blake Freeland out of BYU. Look, 6'8", 302. This is a guy, ran a 4.98 40 at the combine, then the 37-inch vertical leap. This guy is setting records for offensive linemen in that area. And, I thought that he was a solid offensive tackle, left tackle there for the BYU Cougars. The biggest thing with him, I thought he was more of a finesse tackle. I thought you didn't see him generating a ton of movement, but he's a very easy mover in pass protection. Really the biggest thing is that upper body strength. He has a lot of that. There's no question about that. He can definitely manhandle guys, repped out 225 25 times. So there's really no question about the upper body strength. It's really more of that lower half where he needs to get bigger. He's a better prospect than Brady Christensen was. A guy that could end up going off the board there in round number 2, but I think he's ultimately going to be a third-round pick. And when I look at him, he did the short shuttles in the low 4.3s, 3-cone drill right around 7.2 at BYU's Pro Day with that athleticism. Again, day 2, not a problem. A guy that I think could ultimately hear his name called, though, in round number 2 when it's all said and done. Next, I'm going with the Alabama offensive tackle who transferred from Vanderbilt, and that is going to be Tyler Steen. 6'6", 321. And look, I think Steen, he started his career at a defensive tackle for the Commodores, moved to left tackle, played there for 3 seasons before transferring to Bama. I think he's got really good length, uses it to his advantage, good play awareness, picks up stunts, reacts quickly to secondary moves. Foot speed is just okay. So I think ultimately he'll be a right tackle at the next level, but I think when I look at him, I think he does have starter potential, and I think round 3 feels about right for him. Jalen Duncan is an interesting study, 6'6", 306 out of Maryland. This is a guy, he started 39 games for the Terrapins at left tackle. He's very athletic, impressive lateral agility to slide in pass protection, quick feet, easily seal the edge of the ground game, but he gets overmatched at times. I think that's really one of the biggest things. And, frankly, when he gets beaten at the point of attack, I haven't seen him recover a ton. I love some of the technique, keeps that back straight, and you see the typewriter feet. But I think he can get overpowered at times. I wonder if maybe he'll be a guard at the next level. I do think that there are some really good qualities to him, and that he could end up being a solid tackle at the next level. I think the jury's out overall, though, with him. That's really what I'm kind of waiting to see out of him. Wanye Morris out of Oklahoma is the other guy that I have penciled in at round number 3, 6'5", 307. This was a guy who started his career at Tennessee, transferred to Oklahoma, has that positional versatility, being able to play left and right tackle. I'm looking at the 49ers. Obviously, with Mike McGlinchey gone, they've got a hole there. I think Colton McKivitz right now is the starting right tackle. If we were to start play today, I think they obviously need to get an upgrade there. And Wanye Morris is a guy that I think I like the footwork, I like his some of the strength and the power there at the point of attack. So, Wanye Morris, we know that at the Combine he pulled his hamstring. We didn't get to see a ton of him there, but I'm definitely excited to see what Wanye Morris can do at the next level. I think he's a guy that could end up surprising and end up being ultimately a better pro than he was a player in college. When you look at Carter Warren out of Pittsburgh, 6'5", 311. I've got him coming off the board in round number 4. 35 and 3/8 inch arms, and with Carter, you've got a guy who moves well, good hands, able to strike. What I don't like though about Carter Warren is the pad level. He plays a little bit too upright for me, and so that's where he can lose some of the momentum that he's got. But I'm looking at him round 4, feels about right in terms of his evaluation. And then when you move into round number 5, obviously Nick Saldiveri out of Old Dominion, 6'6", 318. Pretty easy mover there as well. A guy that could potentially kick inside to guard. But this was a guy, look, at Old Dominion, Saldiveri was a guy that I thought more than held his own. And, when you even saw him at the Senior Bowl, that was a moment that wasn't too big for him either. A guy who I think could be a much better pro than he was in college. And again, I love the ability to climb to the second level. You see really good footwork out of him as well. So that's really what I see out of Saldiveri. I think he'll be a solid 5th round pick. Another guy that I think is going to come off the board in round number 5 is Asim Richards. And with Asim Richards, I'm a little bit higher on him than some other guys. When you watch him play there at UNC, this is a guy that has the ability. He's a 3-year starter there, a guy that can generate a lot of movement in the running game. You see the power, very heavy-handed. So the power is there. He's a guy that can clear a lot of room, but you worry about some of the footwork a bit. In pass protection, so you wonder if maybe he's going to kick inside to guard. But again, a guy that you really love his physicality and the way that he plays the game there at tackle. Richard Garage there out of Florida, 6'5", 306, 34-inch arms. For the Gator, I think this is a guy who moves well, really good technique. A guy that had 42 starts to his name. One of the mainstays, really the consistent presence there on that Gators offensive line, and a guy that I think he could get overpowered at the point of attack. I think that's something that he's going to have to watch out for. But I think 6th, 7th round range as developmental offensive tackle, I think feels about right there for him. Then you look at Ryan Hayes out of Michigan, 6'6", 298, 5'18", 40. This is another guy, I think ultimately could end up kicking inside to guard. He has 32.5-inch arms, and so you obviously worry about that for Hayes. One of the things that I look at with him is his ability to drive guys down the field, the drive blocking. This is a 2-time Joe Moore Award recipient, right? When you're talking about the offensive line, and I think the physicality is there. I think if anything, he'd be a right tackle, but I think he's probably gonna have to kick inside to guard because of that lack of overall length. Jackson Kirkland at Washington, 6'7", 321. This was a guy that I think everyone was expecting to see his career take off there at Washington. And then he got, was battling injuries. Injuries really got the best of him. That back injury was really a killer for him. They brought him back. He played inside at guard. And I thought that really kind of helped resurrect his career. Is he a guard? Is he a tackle? That's really the big question mark they're going to have to figure out. Got to worry about that pad level a little bit, but he started to get some of the movement skills back, so I think he's worth that risk there in round number 6. Really want to see where he's going to wind up playing. Warren McClendon out of Georgia, 6'4", 306. He's got better length than I thought that he would. Again, coming in at 6'4". When you watch both he and Broderick Jones play, you thought there wasn't a whole lot of length to him. I think Warren McClendon could play tackle. He could play guard. But the positional versatility for me is really the thing that I'm looking forward to most with him. And so that's why I ultimately have him coming off the board there in that 6th to 7th round range. And then obviously you have John Ojukwu. And when you talk about John Ojukwu, you have to think about his durability and a guy that, 51 starts. I feel like he played on that blue turf there at Boise State for a long time. I think this is a guy that, because of his makeup athletically, he's not the quickest guy by any means, but I think he's definitely physical at the point of attack. Could end up being Potentially a swing tackle, but more than likely I think he's going to end up kicking inside to guard as well. Developmental guy that I think is going to come off the board probably in late day 3, so that's 6th to 7th round range as well. So if we're talking tackles, true tackles, and there are a couple of tackles that I actually have penciled in as guards. Some of these guys I was talking about, yes, we're probably going to see them kick inside to guard, but I'm still keeping them at the tackle position for now. We're at 19. So if we're talking about 19 tackles ultimately getting themselves drafted, then ultimately that's going to be comparable to the 2018-2019 drafts. But I think when you look at the top of the draft, much better depth in the first 2 days of the draft than what we saw in either of those drafts, which then takes us to the offensive guard spot. So if we move to 2018, this was when Quentin Nelson came off the board, number 6 overall. So again, seeing guards coming off the board in the top 10, that's not unheard of. When I think of that, you've got Peter Skoronski. Obviously, that's going to be a pick where is he going to come off the board? Is he going to be a top 10 pick? When you look at the 2015 draft, going back a few more years, Brendan Sheriff was a top 5 pick going to Washington. And this was the guy that played tackle at Iowa, ultimately kicked inside to guard, and we know what he's meant there in Washington and now in Jacksonville, really solidifying the Jaguar offensive line for Trevor Lawrence. But 2018, we also saw Isaiah Wynn. We know that the experiment with him, they were talking about the shorter arms. Really, it was more injuries than anything else. Didn't really work out there in New England. Then there was Will Hernandez. I think that was the guy that I was really excited about coming out of UTEP. Really just hasn't panned out there. He was a 2nd-round pick, as was Braden Smith. Just the 4 guys taken in the first 2 days of the draft. Then we saw Wyatt Teller. Look, this is a guy who played for the Bills. He's with the Browns now. The toughness there, he was really kind of the gem of the second day there, coming off the board, number 166 overall in round number 5. 2019, we saw a big jump there at 15 total offensive guards taken. You look at Chris Lindstrom coming number 14 overall, coming out of BC to the Falcons. He's had his contract re-upped. We know Cody Ford there with the Bills, a guy that's kind of struggled a bit there. He was a tackle, was he a guard, and ultimately, has kind of fallen out of favor there in Buffalo. Dalton Reisner with the Broncos. We know with him, he's still a free agent, waiting to see if he's going to hear his name called. But this was an interesting draft because you also had Elshon Jenkins to the Packers. We know his versatility has really been huge. Then round number 3, Michael Dieter has gotten some starts there with the Dolphins. You've got Nate Davis. Nate Davis now, drafted by the Titans, now signed with the Bears. Connor McGovern, he's on his way from the Cowboys to the Bills. So you've got some guys, Ben Powers, he got some playing time there with the Ravens there in round number 4. Phil Haynes is currently penciled in as a starter there for the Seahawks as well. So you got some good depth in that draft class overall at the guard spot. In 2020, another 18 guards taken. So we're continuing to see that uptick on the interior of that line, but no guards taken in round number 1. Just one guard taken in round number 2, and that was really a tackle in Robert Hunt there to the Dolphins. Out of Louisiana, kicked inside to guard, and we know the rest is history there as a starter. Damian Lewis, Jonah Jackson coming off the board there in round number 3, along with Tyree Phillips. John Simpson for the Raiders and seeing some playing time as well. Logan Stenberg of the Lions has been a depth piece. Kevin Dotson to the Steelers. He's a guy that's been in the starting lineup, but it sounds like they may be moving on from him. Then maybe the steal of the position group, number 182 overall, Michael Onwenu to the Patriots, coming out of Michigan. Look, this is a guy that really showed up well in his rookie season there at 2020, has continued to develop. And then John Runyon, his teammate, just taken 10 picks later to the Packers. He's been a starter for Green Bay as well. 2021, really a draft class that didn't have a whole lot of depth. We saw it at the top. I didn't mention Rashawn Slater because we really had it penciled in as a guard, and he fooled everybody. He's been a tackle and been a damn good tackle there for the Chargers. Injuries are really the biggest thing for him, sitting there at number 13 overall. 14 was Elijah Vera Tucker out of USC going to the Jets, another guy who's been hit with some injuries, but look, he played guard, he's played tackle for the Jets. Obviously the best offensive lineman that they have on the roster right now. Aaron Banks was a physical guard coming out of Notre Dame, and he was taken in round number 2, starter there for the 49ers. Ben Cleveland has seen some playing time there for the Ravens in round number 3. Trace Smith, obviously, has been a guy that's gotten to start there for the Chiefs. 6th round pick. I know the medicals were a big reason why his draft stock fell. And then in 2022, 21 guards taken. And when you look at that, we actually had 8 guards taken in the first 3 rounds of the draft. Kenyon Green and Zion Johnson going 15 and 17 to the Texans and Chargers. Green, the physicality, and then Zion Johnson, the versatility and the athleticism. Cole Strange really hit the performance at the Senior Bowl, kind of really set the tone there coming out of Tennessee Chattanooga. And Bill Belichick loved what he saw, made him the 29th overall pick. You've got Luke Gadecki for the Buccaneers right now, penciled in as a starter at guard. He was a 2nd round pick at Ingram of the Vikings, also in round number 2. Joshua Ezeudu out of North Carolina, really a find there in the 3rd round for the Giants. Dylan Parham is going to be a starter for the Raiders at number 90 overall. And then Logan Bruss really was going to be a starter for the Rams, got injured. I think the Rams really expecting big things out of him. Then you get to round 4, and Spencer Burford out of UTSA was a tackle, kicked inside to guard, has been a starter there for the 49ers. Braxton Jones was actually slated here as a guard. I think coming out, that was kind of the expectation. He's been the left tackle there for the Bears, and they've loved what they've seen to the point where Braxton Jones is actually going to be their left tackle going into 2023. Number 168 overall out of Southern Utah. Marcus McKeithen. Look, the Giants loved North Carolina guards so much, they picked up both of them, getting him there in round number 5. Jamari Sawyer. This is a guy picked up by the Chargers in round number 6. I was surprised that he was still on the board as long as he was, because I looked at him, I thought he could play tackle, I thought he could play guard, the versatility was there, and then ultimately when Rashawn Slater went down to injury, Sawyer was able to take that tackle spot. I think he's going to be a starter there at guard for the Chargers. I really do. And I think that, just that versatility obviously gives a team options. So as we're talking about guys and their positional versatility, that's really going to help their draft stock overall. And so when you look at this draft class, I think there's one guard that we're going to see come off the board in round number 1, and that's O'Cyrus Torrence out of Florida. 6'5", 330 pounds. This is a dude. Look, he started there at Louisiana for 3 years and then followed his head coach, Billy Napier, when he took the job at Florida. But when you talk about what O'Cyrus Torrence means to that offensive line, a guy that in 46 starts did not give up a single sack. I mean, just think about that. 0 sacks given up. I mean, that's ridiculous. Power, violent hands, could generate a ton of movement in the ground game. Good awareness on the move, effective as a puller as well, can locate guys and dominate them at the 2nd level, but then also slow down and seal off the edge for the running back as well. Hands are really good in pass protection, good enough footwork to keep up as well. Once he's on target, he's not letting go of you. Also worth mentioning is he was penalty-free for Florida this past season. When I look at the physicality, the desire to dominate on every play, it just sounds like a guy that Dan Campbell would want to have play for him. When you look at that right guard spot, they have Halapuli Vaitai, they have Graham Glasgow that they signed to a 1-year deal. I think they could do better. Vaitai is in the final year of his deal as well, and he's coming off of a back injury. Plus, Jonah Jackson is in the final year of his rookie deal at left guard. So I think you get O'Cyrus Torrence in there. He could probably start right away at right guard, and then can give you some options there even at left guard in the event Jonah Jackson doesn't re-sign. I think that makes a ton of sense to me, and I think O'Cyrus Torrence is going to be a day 1 starter in the league. My number 2 guard is Steve Avila out of TCU. 6'3", 332 pounds, and this dude is another guy that just wants to beat guys up. He's He's a lot of fun to watch, very physical at the point of attack, a guy that can definitely get nasty. I think he enjoys the contact, enjoys really just making guys' lives miserable because you love the physicality. He just seems like he's really enjoying himself out there when he's providing some of these devastating blocks and really just laying some guys out. I look at Dallas. Dallas needs some physicality there. If you have Tyler Smith and Steve Avila together, I think that'd be a lot of fun to watch. But if you watch, people talk about the foot speed or lack thereof. Put on the film of TCU against Georgia and watch what he does with Jalen Carter. You'll see what he's capable of there. Did a great job shooting his hands inside, get a grip on Carter early, keeps him at a distance. Carter tries to work up the field. The hand placement and feet allowed him to stay square, keep him in front, and then when Carter tried to attack the outside, showed really good lateral agility, keep him in front, and then when Carter tried to work back inside, the secondary move, he was able to change the direction, keep Carter in front of him, kept him from getting penetration. Really, I thought, Avila, the leverage, the power, I thought he was one of the standouts there for TCU in that blowout national championship game. And I think, again, a day one starter and a guy that is going to really be a lot of fun to watch there at the next level. In round number 3, I've got Braden Daniels out of Utah. 6'4", 294, mainstay there for the Utes up front. And what you love about him is the athleticism, his ability to keep guys in front of him. And the movement skills are absolutely there. I think this is a guy that can get overpowered sometimes, footwork issues at times. I ultimately think he's going to kick inside to guard, played left tackle there for Utah. I think the move inside is probably best for him. Anthony Bradford out of LSU, 6'4", 332 pounds, ran a 5.0840 at the combine with that size. This is a guy that's played tackle and guard for the Tigers. And when I think about Bradford, I think about a guy that can definitely be physical at the point of attack. He started 12 or 13 games a season ago and very heavy-handed, plays with a mean streak. I look at him and I look at Tennessee, and if they don't end up going with Peter Skoronski in round number 1, and I look at Bradford, you put him in there, and man, that nastiness, I think that's required of offensive lines blocking for Derrick Henry. I think he brings some of that attitude there for sure at the next level. How about McClendon Curtis there out of Chattanooga? 6'6", 324, 35-inch arms. Ran a 5.24 40 at the combine as well. This is a guy that I thought moved a lot better than I think people were expecting. When I look at him, he has the versatility, played tackle there at Chattanooga, but he's going to kick inside to guard more than likely. But a guy that I think, because of that versatility, can play a lot of different positions. You like the athleticism there. And Chattanooga, they've got a reputation now for developing offensive linemen with Cole Strange as a first-round pick. I think McClendon Curtis is going to keep that that torch going. He's going to carry the torch there for the Mocs. John Gaines II there out of UCLA. 6'4", 303, kind of 5.01 40 at the combine. Another guy who I thought was tremendously athletic. I think he needs to clean up the technique a little bit. I think he relies on the athleticism a little bit too much, but he's definitely a guy that I think can play both the guard and center positions. I'm going to give you another name, and if you were watching the combine, he was not invited, but a dude that definitely plays with the nastiness, and that's Chandler Zavala out of NC State. Definitely going to be coming off the board in round number 4. 6'5" and 325 pounds. Ran a 5.01 40 at the combine, which I thought was staggering. No sacks given up, just 8 pressures. And when you also look at him, the power as a run blocker is absolutely there. Once he gets his hands on you, it's pretty much over. Would have loved to have seen him compete against some of the other guys there at the combine, but I think he's a given in round number 4. When we look at one other guy in round 4, I've got him slated higher than I think some other guys, and that's ultimately Andrew Voorhees there out of USC. 6'6", 310. We didn't really get to see him compete too much there at the combine because he tore his ACL. But decides, you know what, I'm going to go show up. I'm still going to go ahead and hit the bench press. Put up 225 38 times. And he did so really on one leg. When you look at him, the lack of length is concerning. 32 and an eighth inch arms. Played tackle there at USC. They ultimately kicked him inside to guard because of that lack of overall length. You love the movement skills. You love his ability to climb to the second level. Very intelligent player. The lack of length is going to be concerning, but I still think that he could be a starting quality guard at the next level. That's why I still have him coming off the board in round number 4, despite the knee injury. He could fall to 5th or 6th round because of that, because of the knee. But I think 4th round feels about right for Andrew Voorhees. Nick Broker there out of Mississippi, 6'4", 305. Not a tremendous athlete by any means, but this is a guy, look, he played tackle there at Mississippi, kicked inside to guard, and I thought the mirror skills were something that really jumped off the film to me. He's limited athletically. I think that's definitely apparent. What you saw with him was a dude that effort was never an issue, a guy that wanted to latch on to you and would not let go. I thought the balance and being able to slide a little bit there in the passing game, struggled there at times, but I think really with the running game, really wanted to finish his blocks, drive guys. You saw the angles really opening up there for him as well, really showing a good understanding of that. I think ultimately 5th round feels about right for Nick Broker. I look at Jordan McFadden out of Clemson, 6'2", 303. Look, he's only 6'2", but he has 34-inch arms, ran a 4.99 40 at the combine. I think Jordan McFadden could very well end up coming off the board much sooner. When you watch him play there at Clemson, very good as a drive blocker there in the running game. The guy that did a really good job keeping his man square and really driving him down the field. I think, obviously his ability on pass protection, I thought he slid pretty well, moved decently. Hand placement wasn't an issue. Just that lack of overall length was what got him into trouble. I think he kicks inside to guard, and this is a guy that I think can start at the next level for a long time. You're wanting to talk about high character guys, 3-year starter and a team captain for Clemson. So I definitely see him being a guy that is going to be well liked in the locker room as well. I think that goes a long way. Jarrett Patterson there out of Notre Dame, 6'5", 306, intelligent player, really short arms, 31 and 3/8-inch arms, ran a 5'3", 340 at the combine as well. So heavy-footed, but he's an intelligent player. I think that's really what he has going for him. The shorter arms, obviously he played center there at Notre Dame. There's a good chance that maybe that's what he's going to have to kick inside to is ultimately play that position. But I think about his longevity, and it's really going to be, for a guy who's 6'5" and 306, those shorter arms are really going to be a problem for him. But what you love about him is when he gets his hands on you, he's looking to try to finish you whenever he does that. The punch, you love that as well. His ability to kind of climb and take on blitzers, be able to take on linebackers at the next level. Those are things that you definitely see with. And once he does lock onto you, he's not letting go. You just worry about guys being able to get into his body and drive him back off the football, and then you worry about the lack of foot speed overall. Emil Ekiyor, they're out of Alabama, 6'2", 314. I think he's going to come off the board in the 5th or 6th round, much like Jarrett Patterson. This is a guy that I think has some versatility to him. I think he's a guy that could end up even kicking inside to center when it's all said and done. So that positional versatility is something that's definitely going to help. This is a guy that, look, he played at Bama, was a 3-year starter for them. And, I think the fundamentals absolutely jump out to you. The footwork, the hand placement, the leverage that he plays with. A guy that, look, another guy that just felt like he was at Bama for a long time. I'm maybe a little low on him. At one point I actually had him coming off the board as high as round number 3. I think ultimately the lack of overall size is what ends up getting him a little bit because he is only 6'2". But man, he's just a good football player, and that's why I think he ends up finding his way onto a roster. Jovan Gwynn out of South Carolina, 6'2", 297, 5'1", 240 at the combine. I just look at his body type. To me, he feels like a center. And 31 and 3/4-inch arms kind of tells you that maybe he is going to be a center. But a guy that I think the athleticism was better than expected, especially what he showcased there at the combine. And then how about City Sal there out of Eastern Michigan, 6'5", 323 pounds. This is a dude that was opening up gaping holes for the running back Samson Evans. And look, he moved a heck of a lot better than I think people were expecting. He ran a 5.07 40 at 6'5", and 323 pounds. You love the physicality. This is a dude that's going to get nasty. He's going to get in the trenches and really want to try to move guys around. I think 6th, 7th round. I have him penciled in as a 7th rounder right now, but I think he's the guy that could end up coming off the board much sooner. I think the movement skills, there were some question marks there. Two other guys that I forgot to mention, one a guard, one a tackle. The guard is Antonio Mafi. They're out of UCLA. This is a big dude, 6'4", 355 pounds. I think power and really that nasty demeanor are things that I think teams are really going to love. I think he's going to end up being a 5th-round pick. He wasn't invited to the combine, but a guy that, look, the nastiness, the size, the physicality, he may actually, when I think about it, may actually get drafted ahead of John Gaines just because of the physicality and that nastiness. There are a lot of teams that are looking for guys that have that mean streak, and Mafi's definitely going to bring that to the table. And then Joey Fisher out of Little Shepherd. The tackle is 6'5", 322 pounds, put up 40 reps in the bench press, runs a 4.940 with a 1.68 10-yard split. Athleticism for days, moves really well. I think he's going to end up getting his name called there in round number 7. And if that does happen, then that would be our 20th tackle, which would put us just 2 tackles shy of last year's draft class, where we saw 22 offensive tackles taken. And if we talk about the guard position, I have 16 guards coming off the board. We saw 21 a year ago, and we had Kenyon Green, Zion Johnson, and Cole Strange all taken in round number 1. We just have O'Cyrus Torrence really at the top of this group. I think there is some depth. I mean, I love Steve Avila. I think he's a guy that's going to be a day 1 starter, but then it gets a little thin there in round number 3. And then I think you're going to start seeing that depth really come into play there in rounds 4 through 7. So guard class, it puts you, I think, one better than what we had in 2019. So at least as of right now, it's not going to blow you away. But when we look at all those tackles that also could be guards at the next level, when it comes down to it, when you're talking about the offensive line group, you may have some guys that kind of share those positions. And when we're talking about some of these numbers, we may see them change at the end of the year. So that takes us to the center spot. And the pivot, I'll tell you what, it's been interesting over the last 5 years. In 2018, there were 11 centers taken. Just think about that. Frank Ragnow and Billy Price came off the board, 20 and 21 overall. We know what Ragnow's meant to the Lions. Billy Price struggled. Austin Corbett really played guard, but he was a guy that the Browns, I think, were expecting to possibly play center there. Number 33 overall, the first pick in round number 2. James Daniels played some center there for the Bears. Now he's playing right guard for the Steelers. Came off the board 39 overall. Mason Cole from the Cardinals. Now he's with the Steelers. He came off the board in round number 3. I think another guy of note that year was Bradley Bozeman, the Bama center, taken in the 6th round by the Ravens. 2019, well, we only had 7 centers taken, and that was where we had Garrett Bradbury come off the board, number 18 overall to the Vikings. Really was known just as the reach block king coming out of NC State. Then in round number 2, Eric McCoy going to the Saints, number 48 overall, out of Texas A&M. I think some people were thinking maybe he'd be a first-round pick. Falls to the 2nd round. Not a ton of depth, though, at the position that year. 2020, we saw another 9 centers taken. Cesar Ruiz coming off the board in round number 1. I think that was really where the surprise was for the Saints, taking back-to-back centers with Eric McCoy in round 2 and then Cesar Ruiz in round 1. But we know both of those guys are starting in New Orleans. Matt Hennessy for the Falcons, taken in round number 3, a guy who offers some positional versatility at both center and guard. Lloyd Cushenberry, I think the Broncos are looking to upgrade there. He was taken in round number 3. Tyler Biadasz, how did he fall to round number 4, number 146 overall? He's been kind of the anchor there in the middle of that offensive line for the Cowboys. A bit of a surprise that he fell as far as he did, but they wound up jumping on him there in round number 4, which shows you that you can always get day 3 gems. So as we're looking at the draft classes, guys that we're talking about in rounds 4 through 7, doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to make an impact. 2021, 10 centers taken. And this was the year where I think we were expecting Creed Humphrey, potentially Landon Dickerson, to come off the board in round number 1. Ultimately, Landon Dickerson, number 37 overall. Those knee injuries at Bama didn't really hurt his draft stock. He's going to end up being a starter there for the Eagles. whether it's at center or it's at guard. I think he's really played well at guard. So I think you may see Cam Jurgens kick inside to center whenever Jason Kelce decides it's time to hang it up. Josh Myers, number 62 overall, followed by Creed Humphrey at 63 to the Packers and Chiefs. We know what Creed Humphrey's meant to Patrick Mahomes and company there. Quinn Miners, remember him coming out of Wisconsin Whitewater. He was really the guy to watch from a small school, much like Cody Malkin's been out of North Dakota State at this year's Senior Bowl. And then finally in 2022, just 6 centers taken. We saw Tyler Linderbaum come off the board in round number 1. Cam Jurgens followed that up round number 2 to the Eagles. Luke Fortner has been a starter there for the Jags. He came off the board, first pick in round number 3. Zach Tom, he played center at Wake Forest, but he's also played tackle. I think he played some guard there as well. All that positional versatility. I think he wound up playing, right tackle for the Packers. Came off the board in round number 4, so you love some of that positional versatility that he offers there as well. So when you're talking about the centers in the last 5 years, not a ton of depth at the position, but we've had at least one center come off the board in each of the last 5 years, with the exception of 2021, and that's when really we saw the depth in round number 2 with Dickerson, Myers, and Humphrey. A bit of a surprise that we didn't see any of those guys come off the board in round 1. That was a year that was really hard to mock because we were looking at those guys thinking at least Creed Humphrey was going to get drafted in round 1. Really a surprise when he fell to round number 2. Now, when we look at this year's draft class at the pivot, I think ultimately for me, I think the first thing that stands out is John Michael Schmitz, Joe Tippmann, and then lesser degree Luke Whippler. So for me, I actually have John Michael Schmitz penciled in as my number 1 center, 6'3", 301. And with John Michael Schmitz, I think people want to give him a hard time about the lack of athleticism. But look, put on the game film, and really, if you're still not convinced, go watch the Senior Bowl and watch what he was able to do. You saw the ability to, the movement skills on reach blocks, the footwork, taking proper angles, not only to get to the defender, uses that low pad level to win at the point of attack, finish those blocks as well, proved he can anchor in pass protection. That's where he dominated the one-on-ones at the combine. The leverage, his ability to anchor. He's going to be an immediate starter. I think the Seahawks sitting there at 37, they would need to jump at the chance to get a center, and I think Schmitz would definitely be that guy. Joe Tippmann, 6'5", 313, the junior out of Wisconsin, kind of a rare breed. This is a really tall, long center, and look, this is a guy very, very adept at pass protection there for the Badgers. Gave up just 1 sack, 5 total pressures on 338 pass blocking snaps according to Pro Football Focus. Strong at the point of attack, has the footwork required to be a starter there at the next level. Again, pivotal role in the Badgers' vaunted running game. And so I think he's a guy that's going to transition very well to the next level. I look at the Giants. The Giants are sitting there in round number 2. They've got a pick at 57 overall. I think the Giants are going to end up taking Tippmann. Could Tippmann come off the board in round number 1 to the Giants? Not likely, but I think really day 2, in really round number 2, that's where our 2 centers are going to come off the board early. Then you look at Luke Whippler. I look at 65 overall, the Houston Texans. Look, they need a center to compete with Scott Quessenberry for the starting spot. 2-year starter for the Buckeyes. Good movement skills, good understanding of angles as well. Can be an effective lead blocker, pulling around. I think Dameon Pierce kind of needs that in the ground game, so that makes a lot of sense. One final guy to mention is the Remington Award winner, and that's going to be Olu Oluwatimi. And with Oluwatimi, look, 6'2", 309. When you look at the numbers, he's not going to wow you with any of the workouts or anything like that. But look, he's a Remington Award winner for a reason. Highly, highly intelligent player, and a guy that I think can start at the next level. I think people give him a hard time. He is a waist bender, but I'm not too worried about that. This is a guy who has really good technique. I think he does play with good leverage for the most part, and you love the hand placement. That's one of the things that you definitely see. Does really well on double teams. I think he's ultimately eventually going to find his way into a starting role. It may not be right away, but I think he's a guy, look, the intelligence for days. I think he's a guy that can end up sliding in there. So that's it for day 2 of the draft, just 4 centers taken. The one X factor there, I think, is going to be Ricky Stromberg there out of Arkansas, 6'3", 306. He's a guy that I think has a chance to end up coming off the board in round number 3. Another waist bender, I think that really messes with him, especially in pass protection. A guy that I think can be physical at the point of attack. The biggest thing that drives me nuts is he doesn't always keep those feet moving, and when he doesn't bring the feet, then he doesn't always sustain his blocks. But a guy that I think is highly intelligent, a guy that understands angles, does a really good job there. And look, he was a mainstay there for the Arkansas Razorbacks, a team that loved to run the football, and a guy that I think was the unquestioned leader of that group. Very well coached by Sam Pittman and company, and a guy that, look, I think I was a little hard on my grades there with Ricky Stromberg. I was expecting a little bit more out of him initially out of the gate. Saw a lot of the waist bending and a lot of the inability to keep those feet driving and inability to sustain some of the blocks. But over time, you watch him, you see the intelligence, high football IQ, and just the overall awareness out there on the football field. I ultimately think he's going to end up being a starter. I do think it's going to be coming off the board there in round number 4. Juice Scruggs out of Penn State, 6'3", 301, ran a 5'2", 240 there at the Combine. And look, Juice Scruggs, I think for all the attention that all the other Big Ten centers, and when you think about the Big Ten centers, I mean, between Tippmann and Oluwatimi and Luke Whippler, this guy really has been kind of the guy that nobody's really talking about, but I think he actually has a chance to compete for a starting spot at the next level. He could end up playing guard as well. I think this is another intelligent player, a guy that was a team captain, decent in pass blocks. I thought he did a decent job anchoring, pretty good technique as well. He's a guy that's just so tough at the point of attack. Anchors very well. I think he's a guy that's going to see himself drafted probably in that round 6 range. That feels about right for Juice Scruggs. And then the final center to come off the board, I think in round 6, round 7 area, is going to be Alex Forsyth out of Oregon. Played a lot of games for the Ducks, 6'4", 303, limited athletically. You see the technique, you see the hands. He's battled some injuries there as well, so I think that further limits the athleticism. But I think because of the intelligence, some of the intangibles that he brings to the table, and the physicality, I think there's a chance that we hear his name called late in the draft, more than likely in round number 7, possibly sneaks his way into round number 6, and I think that would be it. If that happens, if we see all of these centers taken, that would be 7 centers. That feels right about right with what we've seen with past draft classes. That puts us actually on par with the 2019 draft, where we saw 7 centers taken. That was the Garrett Bradbury, Eric McCoy draft. And then that actually puts us one ahead of last year's draft with Linderbaum, Juergens, Fortner, and Tom. I mean, look at that. Those 4 guys that really have made an impact for their respective teams in last year's draft. The question is going to be just how many of these guys are going to do the same. I think there are actually 4 or 5 guys that have the potential to be able to do that. With John Michael Schmitz, Joe Tippmann, Luke Whippler, Oluwatimi, Ricky Stromberg, that's 5 centers who I think could end up starting next season at some point during the season. So I think that would be really interesting to see how all of that plays out, the positional battles, really where these guys are going to go. There are some teams that are out there that need centers, so I think really it's just finding their way to these guys, and when will they pull the trigger for these guys to come off the board. So that really not only puts a bow on our offensive line, but that really wraps up the offense. We've gone from the quarterbacks through the running backs, receivers, tight ends, and now offensive line. Now we're going to be headed to the defense. And we're going to be talking about edge rushers first, and we'll get into the defensive tackles, the linebackers, and then we'll get into the secondary after that. And when you talk about the edge rush class, this is really going to be a fun group to talk about. I think there's a lot of depth here. You can get value in all 3 days of the draft. But when you look at this draft class, obviously in round 1, you're going to have Will Anderson Jr., then you're going to have Tyree Wilson, Lucas Van Ness. You've got Nolan Smith and Miles Murphy coming off the board in round number 1. But it's that second tier that really makes this draft class, the depth. So you're talking about Will McDonald the fourth. You're talking about Tuli Tuipulotu out of USC. You're talking about Keon White from Georgia Tech. You're going to talk about Isaiah Foskey. You're going to talk about Derek Hall. You're going to talk about Felix Enadike Uzoma. How about Ade Adabare out of Northwestern? There are a lot of guys there that are going to come off the board. I think in round number 2, then Zach Harrison, Andre Carter, some guys with some serious length. And then we're not even talking about B.J. Ojulari and Byron Young, guys who I think could end up being second-round picks that may even slide into round number 3 just because of the depth at the position. Somebody in this group is going to get left out when we're talking about the first 2 rounds of the draft. But I think all of these guys are going to hear their names called on the first 2 days of the draft. But there's still some depth there that we're going to be talking about as we get into day 3. It's such an intriguing group, and I can't wait for the next podcast so we can go ahead and break that group down a little bit further. So until next time, everyone, for Ready for